Hello, thank you for joining us. So today I'll present a webinar with Samuel, who works in the studio with us. So please enjoy, and if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and we will endeavour to get in contact with you. Or you can contact info@suho.com.au. Thank you. So welcome, Sam. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
You've been part of the studio team at SUHO for just over a year now. Came into a very, very busy time at the 10-star house and have jumped right on that and done wonderfully. Just wanted to have a bit of a chat about your background firstly. You, much like myself, have come from a different origin, different career path. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, where your interests lay and how you made that journey into sustainability?
Yeah, my previous profession had nothing to do with architecture, very little to do with sustainability, that's for sure. I was in healthcare. I was a practicing dentist for a bit over 10 years. And like a lot of people in a lot of careers, I found that I didn't get a lot out of it, apart from money, which was nice. But no, I was not particularly satisfied. I was not enjoying myself. And I figured at that point in time that I had still a pretty significant number of years ahead of me as a working person, and that I should do something that I enjoyed doing. And it took me a while, I guess, to work out what that might be. I'd always had an interest in design, and I'd enjoyed doing graphic and other types of design on the side. But wanting to make a career out of it is another thing altogether. So long and short of it is, after trying a few things, having a lot of conversations with a bunch of different people, I settled on architecture as something that would hopefully be more fulfilling than what I had done. It turns out that it is. So that's been a good transition for me. And working in a number of offices around Adelaide, from medium to large practices, doing lots of different things within those practices, I was struck by how, as a profession, how so much of what we do is necessarily driven by the client and by financial constraints. And the thing that often gets neglected as a result of that is our focus on sustainability outcomes. That's slowly changing, but I guess it wasn't changing fast enough for me. So I was looking for an opportunity to work more in that sphere and therefore have a bit more of an impact on the world around me by focusing my talents and my time on working on sustainable projects, which led me to SUHO.
So I was wondering whether your previous career in dentistry and the skills that you developed and probably practiced for many, many years. I was also in a health profession previously. Do you think that those communication skills have actually aided in what you do now? We're often talking one-on-one with clients and like flushing out the nitty-gritty that they maybe don't want to say. Do you think that that has been of advantage also?
There's certainly been a lot that I've brought with me that's been beneficial. Nothing in the way of skills or techniques, because there's literally no translation of dentistry to architecture, but I think it's more the closest parallels are that as a design professional, in building design in particular, you're trying to explain things that a client doesn't necessarily understand. So we are experts in our field, and in the same way, when I was a dentist, I was an expert in my field, working on working with patients and with problems that they didn't necessarily understand. So it was about being able to explain things in terms that a non-professional can understand. So I've sort of learnt that there's some skill involved in being able to translate, I guess, our own vernacular into that of the client or a stakeholder or even a consultant. So just making sure that people understand what you're on about, but also communicating the importance of what you're trying to convey. In dentistry, it was sometimes challenging to convince someone that they needed a particular treatment or procedure carried out. You had to explain the long-term as well as the short-term outcomes, the risks, the costs, and so many other aspects of it. And in that sense, it's no different with designing someone's home or office space. There are short-term issues that obviously need to be considered, but the longer term sometimes takes a little bit more explanation. And particularly when we're talking about sustainable design, that there is sometimes an additional cost upfront, but that there are savings and health benefits and energy efficiencies and many other benefits that come in the longer term that are worth making that initial investment.
Your work on the 10-star house actually came at quite an important time for us because obviously very under the pump to get the project done, but us in our inherent nature and what we do, we don't want to just aim for the star rating. We wanted to take it that little bit further, and your work in terms of the interiors certainly supported that. Can you describe your role in terms of, providing that long-term benefit and the choices that were made on materials?
Yeah, we were pretty careful wherever we could to specify materials and finishes that were resilient and long-lasting, so that there was no need for things to be replaced, other than perhaps a stylistic or taste reason. But what we've put in the house should last for the life of that house. We're also conscious of the lifespan of the materials we've used. Where have they come from? How are they manufactured or harvested or produced? And what impact does that process and the transport and the fabrication of these items have in terms of carbon output, in terms of waste, in terms of toxicity? There are some things which we can't avoid at the moment, so it's about finding the right balance and making the correct compromises. And so I think we've developed a final finish for the 10-star home that balances not only resilience and longevity, but sustainability, efficiency, health, but also beauty, because I think we don't want to make spaces for people that aren't a pleasure to be in. And when you've gone to the extent of producing something like the 10-star home, yes, its function is important and its efficiency and the rating itself and what it represents. These are all important things, but it does need to also be a home that somebody would want to live in and make their home and to raise a family and just enjoy being there.
I think one of my favourite things that you brought into that house that really sort of demonstrate, this aesthetic education of a choice in fixture fitting versus those hidden ones like the plasterboards and so forth, MDF or versions of traditional building products. The one I enjoy the most looking at is the consolidated brass tapware that you brought into the house. Can you explain what your perception is of how people are going to get educated through the home and maybe making these choices on larger buildings or multi-res? The scale might increase if this methodology was put onto other buildings as well.
Well, the tapware we chose for a number of reasons. I will admit that first and foremost it's because it's quite attractive. It's really nice work and quite contemporary, quite fashionable, I suppose, as well. But after that initial attraction to the physical product, it's also about the fact that consolidated brass tapware is based in Adelaide. So this is a product which is made locally, so we're supporting local business, but we also know that the transport and storage implications are quite minimal. We're not having to truck these in or ship them in from anywhere else, and therefore reducing the carbon footprint. And we chose the particular finish on this tapware to be polished but not plated. A lot of tapware and other fittings in that genre are plated, but at their core are brass, because it is such a good material for that kind of thing. But by plating it, we add another chemical process, which in and of itself, has impacts in terms of material waste and chemical waste and the disposal of those products. And so we were able to speak to the fabricator, the manufacturers, and one of their options is to polish it to the level that they would normally do to have it plated, but then leave the plate off. So we've got a raw brass finish. It'll look nice and shiny on opening day, and it will slowly over time change in colour and as it forms a patina as the metals oxidize. That can also be polished by the homeowner or just left to age. And I think for us, it's important that, the house does have a life of its own, and showing some character and age is not a bad thing. And I guess one of the other beauties of a brass product like this is that being unpolished, the raw metals are exposed to the surface. So the copper and zinc and that kind of thing, which gives it an antimicrobial surface, which is of real value in tapware, both in kitchen and bathroom settings. And we've sort of seen this demonstrated, the importance of this demonstrated in recent months with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's nice to know that we've got a beautiful looking product that's locally made that actually contributes to the health and well-being of the occupants of the house.
Yeah, and in terms of the health and well-being, can you describe what is sort of anticipated for the indoor air quality there and the choice of the materials, and how, that design has worked with how the occupants are going to be inside of the house?
Yeah, well, one of the things we've done also is to specify 0 VOC paint finishes, which means that immediately when we start using the house, there are no residual VOCs in the air. Most people will know what it's like when you've just painted a room in the house and there's that lingering smell of paint, that smell is often the volatile organic compounds, which can have an impact on people's health, some more than others. So we've eliminated that completely by using natural timbers for window and door frames and that kind of thing where possible, and having an oiled finish. Again, we've reduced that risk of exposure there. But we also have managed to achieve a high level of air tightness in the house, 0.62, 0.63 air changes per hour, which is at passive house standard. This means that the house is almost completely airtight. So in order to maintain good health, we need good ventilation. So the 10-star home uses an HRV heat recovery ventilation system, which means we've got fresh air being drawn in constantly into all of the rooms of the house, and stale air being exhausted out of the building from those spaces. But the heat that's in the air is maintained, or I should say the energy that's in the air is maintained, so that in winter, when we're exhausting warm air, that warmth is used to provide energy to the air being drawn in, which is heated up almost completely to the same level as the air being drawn out.
In terms of that sort of methodology and larger buildings and WELS ratings, Green Star, certification and all of that, where do you see the methodology or the application of this heading in terms of influencing larger scales of buildings?
We'll see how we go. So moving what we've done into a larger scale is quite doable. The technologies and the techniques and the design details that we've done are perfectly applicable to larger applications. There are obviously more complexities with larger buildings, but these principles are much the same. So it's something that we'd like to see employed on commercial projects, whether it be office spaces, industrial spaces, whatever else. But achieving good air tightness, ventilation, good selection of materials, these are all things that can be quite readily achieved with a bit of application and careful consideration and good construction. And this is not only for new buildings. We'd be keen to work with developers and building owners and builders to refurbish existing spaces to improve air quality, to improve energy efficiency, to improve daylighting, natural ventilation, to provide workplaces that are healthy and enjoyable for the people that are in them.
In terms of let's go on a side track for a little bit, but in terms of what I have known of you for the last 10, 12 years or something, we've known each other, you've been very vocal in the architecture circles, attending lots of events, you've emceed, you've been on the radio, these to me are all sorts of education type things that you very commonly do. And again, maybe comes back to that communication skill that you have. Where do you see your role and the role of the house, the role of this trajectory in terms of sustainability heading, especially maybe in South Australia or more nationally?
I think one of the problems we have as a profession is that people know what it is that we do by the final product. And when I say the final product, I mean the finished building that people look at and experience, but don't necessarily understand. So we're judged very much on the appearance of things, and there's not a good enough understanding of how things work. So I think for those of us that are in the profession and who are able to do so, if we have the platforms to take advantage of, then I think we do need to talk about why we do what we do, how we achieve what we're trying to achieve, and the importance and value to people in terms of their day-to-day life, in terms of the cost that it has financially, but also the impact it has on the environment in the years ahead of us. The construction industry produces a massive amount of carbon dioxide, and this is something that we need to address that people don't necessarily know. And I think as these things become more and more known, the market itself, through the actions of individuals within the market, will start to shift to enable sustainable buildings, sustainable homes to become more affordable and more realistic for everyday owners and builders. At the moment, we have a large number of homes that are built in Australia which are not performing well, performing to minimum standard, I would hope, but still not good enough. Yeah, it's just not good enough given the crisis we face with climate change in particular, with the rising cost of energy. So these are things that have to be addressed, and we need to talk about it more. Be ready to answer the questions, be ready to be challenged on our assumptions, and have the evidence to back up what we are trying to communicate.
Do you think for a lot of architects out there, you think of the normal design process and the stages that we go through, concept design through to site management and so forth. Very commonly, site management is undervalued by clients, and as designers, it's important for us to try to show that value and the quality assurance that we can give in trying to maintain airtight envelopes or best practice construction methods and so forth. What role do you see us as designers and individuals playing in that education in the future? Do you think that sustainability is a really good way for us to show that there is that value for that method within the design process?
I don't see sustainability as the selling point for having the designer manage construction, or at least contribute to the construction process, but it's certainly a very important factor. I think having designers, architects, building designers, involved in the construction process, and particularly in terms of managing the contract of construction, ensures a better outcome for the client, ensures that um, things are built according to plan and according to how they should be, which is not a criticism of builders. It's simply that clients are not necessarily well placed to advocate for themselves in a construction context because they aren't builders, they aren't designers, they don't know as well the ins and outs of what happens on a construction site. So we as the designers can act on their behalf as an advocate to keep everyone accountable, the other consultants, the builder, and to make sure that finances are tracking appropriately, that the build quality is appropriate. With things like air tightness, it does at the moment involve a bit more hands-on because there aren't that many builders that are experienced with the rigors of having to do things to a certain air tightness standard. So it's definitely in the interest of the client and is beneficial to the builder as well to have us on board, at least providing some support and some coaching, some detailing as required. But then the overall finish of the product is something that we take pride in. So we therefore make an effort to ensure the best quality outcome.
Yes, and I definitely see with the collaboration between the electrical trades, the suppliers on 10-star house that involve electrical, so solar, battery storage, heat pump, and all of those integrations, automation, and then applying that to larger scale products, technical, buildings. See that site management and that communication really being enhanced, and it was great to see you on site managing the tail end of this project as well, because there are a lot of little pieces that had to go into place to make us meet those objectives, to have the 10-star house, but also have something where we could have that data come out of. How has your experience been on site, on this particular site, in terms of that coordination, communication?
It's been good. It's been challenging and at times eye-opening because this is the first type of project like this that I've worked on, as it was for the builders themselves. So we all were on a pretty steep learning curve, and we were all learning a lot of things at the same time. There were things that I knew that they didn't, and vice versa. There were things that we had suggested that they had come up with better solutions for. There were traditional or normal practices that they would have liked to have used that we were able to sort of analyze and determine that that wasn't going to meet the requirements that we had in place. So it was overall a really positive experience, and I think the final product speaks volumes that it looks and feels good and functions just as intended. Of course, we're going to monitor that to make sure that's the case, but I think it's testament to the contribution of all the trades, of the builder and of the design team.
Can you speak of any projects in your career thus far in, maybe the health aspect? You've done quite a lot of projects in different areas. It's evident on your CV. But are there any of those that have really piqued your interest in terms of sustainability, indoor health, the wellness of people inside of buildings, that connection to community and so forth?
I would probably say the project that stands out for me was a health facility. So that's the Riverland Oral Health Centre, which I worked on when I was at Grieve Gillette Anderson. I think there's a bit, it's quite liberating working on a health project because you know that health outcomes are paramount. So you're able to, as a designer, ensure that the occupants, be the staff, students in our case as well, and patients, their health is prioritised. And so that, for us on this particular project, meant not only having good mechanical systems in place to ensure good air quality, but natural lighting and physical comfort to make it a safe and healthy place for the staff and clients. I think probably also because that was an oral health clinic, that is a dental clinic. I had some expertise there that I was able to employ that perhaps other designers might not have had. So that was a particularly rewarding project in that regard.
So in terms of where you are now, where you want to be in the future, and developing your own skills and all of that sort of thing, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time advocating for your clients, and what sort of things do you hope to bring to them?
I'd like to think that in 10 years' time, a lot of things we're sort of fighting for at the moment, or that we're arguing for at least, would be considered normal and standard. So we're looking at probably a standard of 6 stars for residential projects at the moment. That seems to me to be well behind where we should be. So I'd like to think that in 10 years' time, 8 stars would be a bare minimum, and probably higher would be better. But I'd like to think also that all new projects would have a high standard of not only energy efficiency, but health consideration, and also sustainability across the board in terms of environmental impact, in terms of materiality and longevity, from the inception of the project through its construction, through the life of the building, with an understanding that buildings don't last forever, so that at the end of the life cycle of a building, in its demolition, that a significant proportion of the materiality of that building can be either reused or recycled, and that we're not just creating buildings that end up becoming landfilled. In 10 years' time, it would be pretty sad to think that we're just generating more waste than we already have as an industry. I'd like to think that in 10 years' time, I won't be having arguments about these kinds of things, and I won't be constantly disappointed and frustrated by what I see being built. At the moment, the good buildings in terms of sustainable outcomes and healthy outcomes are probably in the minority. In 10 years' time, it would be good to think that the vast majority of buildings will be meeting standards that well exceed the current standard, but are ready for the next generation to occupy and use to the end of the lifespan of those buildings.
So thank you very much, Sam, for participating in this interview. It's good for people to get to know you a little bit better. I've certainly learned a few more things that I didn't know about you as well, even though we've known each other for quite some time. It's been a pleasure working with you also on the 10-star building, and just driving that quality assurance into the documentation and making sure that that communication was clear and well managed also. So thank you very much. And
thank you.
Let's see where we go from here.
Yep, onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards. So thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this interview with Sam. If you have any queries, questions for Sam, either, just email us and get in touch. Thank you.